Hello, hello. Welcome back to Get Obsessed. Today, sitting with me is one of my childhood best friends, still best friend in my current life, is Dr. Tanya Cotler. And I'm so excited to speak with her today because she is such a wealth of knowledge, someone I go to with questions. We just have long conversations about so many things. So I was like, yes, I would love to have you as a guest. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's so fun to actually this is like everyone sitting in the living room and eavesdropping on our chats. We do talk this way in real life.
Yeah, I'm excited for people to listen in on our conversation. So let's dive in. First and foremost, I love my listeners to know a little bit of your background, like where you came from, what you do. Before they enter into the conversation, let's give them a little, who are you?
So I am a clinical psychologist. I actually work with both children and adults, which makes me relatively unique in the sense that most people tend to specialize, especially in Canada. That's where I am. In the US, there is a little bit more of me, but I specialize in both children and adults, and specifically in the parent child attachment relationship. That means I might work with a mother who's working through her own early caregiving experiences that often get triggered up again when she's mothering. I may work with a child or a mother and a child or father and a child that is working through trying to either maintain or strengthen their relationship. I think one way to expand it is that I work in also what's considered intergenerational trauma. So the stories we carry about who we are and how we see the world. And that can mean also somebody who is not yet a parent, but is trying to make sense of their early caregiving experience.
I love that. I love the spectrum that you work with and how much, when you talk about your work, how much care and compassion already comes through. I already feel held and so safe in your presence. So I can just imagine how it feels to be one-on-one in a room with you. Thanks for sharing. In your work, you talk about how the parent-child relationship can be a space for the parent's healing too. How do you see mothers repairing old patterns through the very act of just being with their children?
So it's interesting. If there was one soapbox I stand on, it's this one. And it's breaking the myth. I think that some people name, some people don't. It's definitely the unsaid around motherhood, which is that motherhood's another type of destination we arrive to. Maybe it's buy a house, maybe it's get a job, maybe it's get a degree. And one of them for many women is become a mom. And the unsaid is, and then it will fix you or fix whatever has happened to you. That love you're going to feel for your child and the love your child's going to feel for you is going to heal whatever wounds, pain, stories, moments, experiences you may, and many mothers carry that. And so when that doesn't happen, and that doesn't happen, and actually the opposite happens, when the mother's very much split open, right away, the first thing she feels is shame. I wasn't supposed to feel angry. I wasn't supposed to feel anxious. Why is that memory or those moments in my life coming back? I thought I dealt with that, is actually the way more common thing. But if we, first of all, just said that's not what happens, and maybe actually the brain is almost like a built in repair system that is setting you up for this moment because you're so primed to be sensitized to your child that you're also, the brain doesn't say, oh, I'm going to be emotionally sensitive to my kid, but I'm not going to be emotionally sensitive to me. In fact, when the brain changes and areas of gray matter focus on the social emotional areas of the brain, what happens is you also become more tuned in to your child self. So it's like the brain is primed to do the healing that is maybe still needed. That's the first part. The second part that I think is even more significant is that we heal only in connection. Healing is experimental, it's experience. In order to change a pattern of relationships, in order to change a way we think about ourselves, we actually have to do that through a relationship. And the relationship with a child, this doesn't mean you tell your child all your problems, but it's often a very safe relationship where the parent feels loved because that's all the child wants is connection. And so it's actually an opportunity, often without them even naming all the things that are getting awakened, for them to have new experiences, new corrective experiences. It's like when an electrician comes to fix a broken light bulb. This metaphor might fail, but we're going to try. And they actually need to see where the wire is sparking in order to fix it. If an electrician's listening and that's not true, we're going with that. It's the same experience with a child. It has to be a live wire in order to fix it, in order to change it, in order to rewire the brain. And so we're not just raising our children, we're in many ways raising ourselves.
I love that. The question that I have is the mirroring. Is it of every age? So do we have to connect to that inner child in ourselves to connect to where the child is at that moment?
It's a very for the most part, and this is why it's so hard to explain. This is why it's hard for people to get it. This
Mm,
is why it's easier for people to dismiss this until we've just had so much research on what's called moment to moment interaction between a mother and a child. We have what's called the still face experiments, where we really look at millisecond to millisecond interactions. And what we see is that from birth, literally from birth, the child is an active participant in the relationship. The mother coos, the child, as soon as 6 weeks, smiles back. Before that, the child head turns to the mother's voice. So there's an ebb and flow back and forth where they're both creating together the relationship. And so the mother's getting feedback from the very beginning. So is the child, but we always talk about it from the perspective of the child. The mother should be attuned. The child needs to feel seen. The thing is, the child's giving that input to the mother too. They are joining the mother in the dance of the relationship. So the mother is on an unconscious level getting that eye contact and facial expression feedback that to
mm.
her nervous system says, I am loved and I am safe, just like the child is getting it. It's almost like the only thing the mother has to do is pay attention.
So what I'm understanding is when the child creates an emotion, stirs an emotion within the mother, that's when the repair, the growth happens within the mother-child relationship.
Yeah, you're taking it, the repair is
Or
occurs on multiple levels. It's a big word,
yeah.
right? We can get into it. But the way I'd like to describe it is it's experimental, it's experienced. So you and me right now are making eye contact. You hear my voice, I hear yours. My nervous system is responding to your nervous system at every millisecond. Sometimes that could mean that if you're angry, I might feel a certain feeling in my body, even if you don't say the words.
Mm.
So we often talk about what is said and what is done rather than what is felt. Most of our relationships are what is felt. And so it is a constant back and forth about what is felt between child and mother. Some mothers are so wrapped up in their guilt, going back to what I first said, that maybe they're not fully present, that they're sometimes angry, that they're sometimes anxious, all of which is within the realm of normal because so much high stakes stuff and fatigue and exhaustion is going on. But some others are feeling so guilty that guilt is like quicksand. They actually get pulled away from those interactions. They get pulled into their heads rather than into the relationship. And they miss all those cues that might be safety for their nervous system from their
Mm.
child.
I I'm I want to be selfish right now and ask. And so I've had two miscarriages and one was pretty recent. And what I'm feeling is what you're explaining, and I'm trying to make sense of it in my own way to wrap my head around what's happening hormonally and in my nervous system right now, and how to come back to safety. Loss is a big one. It's a lot of grief. And so what's coming up in my mind is and I never thought about it in the way of this child, the embryo that was shaping inside of me is teaching me lessons already. But when you said before even becoming a mother, like you prep women. And so what's coming to mind is that I wake up and all I think about is loss, all the loss that has happened throughout my life, all these episodes of loss. And this morning, I felt this bleakness of what am I really doing? What's going on here? And these questions kept coming up for me. So hearing this kind of makes me feel normal, first and foremost. So thank you. But also, is this what, putting in a practical sense, is this what you're talking about? Is this like what women experience, whether they're their mothers, they're carrying, they've lost, or they're having these connections with their children.
Yes, I agree. And I believe that it begins to occur way before a mother sometimes becomes a mother, in the sense that she gets to hold the baby in her hands. This also is very important that I talk about, that I'm referring to all forms of how we become mothers, surrogacy and egg donor and IVF and adoption. Anyway, from the moment we begin to conceptualize of the baby in mind, something seems to happen to us. And we can call it magical, we can call it terrible, we can call it transformative. I think it's all of them, where it seems to completely shake up our insides from the inside out. We split open, all of us, virtually every mother. What happened to you is different than what happened to someone else. Who you are and how you've seen yourself your whole life, the beliefs you've made about yourself, the ways you've learned to cope in relationships, all of it comes surging forward for everyone. For some people, that means intense trauma. For some people, that means beliefs that they were too sensitive, or their perfectionistic tendencies, beliefs that they have to get it right all the time. So somebody who loses a baby may very much turn that against themselves, especially if their internal belief, for example, was that their body fails them, or that whenever they didn't get something right, they blamed it on themselves. That old coping mechanism, even if they think they've really worked on that one, ooh, comes right up. Why? The stakes are high. And what we know from an attachment standpoint, so attachments become very trendy and everybody talks about it, and I'm going to break it all down. Forget everything you've ever heard for a minute. Otherwise, this is going to make it complicated. Really, all attachment is a way we learn to cope in relationships and with ourselves. When we talk attachment styles, well, I'm anxious, I'm avoidant. I hear it all the time. All we're talking about is, if we broke down categories and sections, what we're talking about is patterns. We're just talking about ways of relating to ourselves and to the world that get formed early on. And we create a template or a blueprint of how see ourselves in the world, and how we think we are going to get our needs met, how we see others, our capacity to get our needs met. We form that early through our interaction with our own parents, and we hold on to it pretty firmly. We develop all kinds of coping strategies around that, and for some of us learn to deal quite well. But when we become mothers, because we are thinking of the most high stake relationship beginning to form, those old blueprints that were really pretty solid, but for some of us more unconscious, they come forth.
That makes so much sense. I feel like I'm experiencing it right now in my body. So it's so hard for me to say, oh, I don't understand. It's living and breathing inside of me. And yeah, I'm
And no
just
one normalizes it.
yeah. And I didn't know that this is what happens to all women or all in all relationships. So thanks for normalizing it and talking about it right here, right now with me. When you're seeing a woman, a mother, how do you help her stay regulated and connected to herself so she can stay attuned to her child, or even just hold herself in her experience?
I'm going to answer that by not answering it for a second. And there's a reason, because the second I answer it from the angle of how does she stay attuned to her child, I am dismissing one of the most important things we know about safe relationships, which is actually that they are in misattunement or misalignment, rupture, all these words, messiness, stepping on each other's toes. I thought you wanted your toast without crust on it. You wanted it with crust. Now you're screaming and I'm getting upset with you because you always want it without crust. That's occurring in 70% of the time in all secure, safe relationships, romantic, parent child. We are in mismatch. And that's not okay, great. Most relationships are in conflict. That's actually what we want by the signs. We want mismatch 70% of the time. Why? Why should we all be in discord 70% of the time? Because that's how we build trust. The ability to move from mismatch to attunement is how we go, oh, you and I can move from the negative to the positive. You and I can move through hard things together. That's how we develop this sense of ruptures or conflicts are not destructive. So I want to start with, we can talk about how a mother can attune, but it's also okay. Not only okay, we want it. That 70% of the time you're rushing out of the door and one kid is screaming that they don't want to go, and you're trying to email your boss and you didn't sleep last night. So you're actually just staring at your coffee cup and not really paying attention to anyone else. And we want that, because the moment when you look at your kids or your child or yourself and say, oops, let's have a redo. I've been missing you, is very healing and important. How do we attune to ourselves, to our child? I come from a Zen Buddhist mindfulness background as well. I integrated a lot. And so anything when I respond to that has to do with presence. As much as you can, however you can, bringing yourself into your body and then into the other person's. I believe that for a mother to attune to her child, she actually has to attune to herself. Motherhood is like one big mindfulness exercise. So all of us have regulatory exercises. We may not know it. Since I was a little kid, I do this. I rub my, I don't, for people who listen and don't watch, I rub my, what finger is this called? Your pointer finger and my thumb together. And I do it all the time. I do it when I'm in sessions. I do it. And I once had a patient point it out. And it was very early in my career. So I got all embarrassed. And then I realized, oh my God, how good is it that she is, through supervision, that she's noticing that I have this regulatory skill that I do while sitting with her, not because she's overwhelming me, because I'm a human being and emotions can be intense and we need to find home in our body somehow. And so sometimes I say to people, can you notice what are the things you do? And in a culture that's so shaming, we often make people get rid of the things they do. Somebody might need to balance their foot a little. Is that helping you or making you actually more anxious in your body is important. Some people lean backwards in their seat. Some people really need to feel their feet on the ground. There are various practices we can teach them, but I often prefer to say to someone, can you notice how you actually regulate your body? Because most of us have practices we learned really early, again, as infants, non-verbally, rocking. Again, some of these can be dysregulating. So you have to know, so we have to find this balance in our body. When we're trying to regulate to our child, again, first we're finding it in ourselves. If you're like, I have no idea what to do, some real common ones are feet on the ground, ice in your hands, the breath, which is probably the easiest one. Of course, you're breathing, but actually bring your attentional awareness to the breath and really paying attention as much as you can on the exhale. Sometimes even I'll say to a mother, breath, just breath. And they'll be like, a breath isn't going to help me. And then they'll come back and they'll go, oh my God, it's so crazy. It actually works. It does. When you're trying to find your child, especially in moments of discord, moments where they're driving you cuckoo bananas, I often say, find their eyes. I don't know if you've ever looked at someone in the eye intensely enough, you could see yourself in their pupil. It's like a mirror. If you can find yourself in their pupil, you're really looking and something happens in your body. It's your nervous system will settle so fast. It's wild, because eye contact with a safe person is one of the primary ways. Connection is one of the primary ways we regulate. Another is if you feel, when parents are sometimes holding their hands in their fists, they're feeling angry. I often say, just open your hands and hold your child against you. You could be angry and hug them, actually. And what happens is, again, your body regulates and softens and reminds you, oh yeah, this is a 2-foot human. I'm probably not as mad at them. I'm mad because I'm feeling invisible right now. And this is an old wound, but it's actually not about them. And so it helps me regulate while I figure out what I actually want to say. So those are some tools
I love it a lot. A question that comes to mind while you're saying all this is, it is high stakes, right? You're shaping your child's early experiences, their nervous system, how they experience sensations and experiences in their life. How can women prevent themselves from taking on all the blame, all the shame of, and just knowing that failures do happen, sometimes ruptures are big, but how do we come back and say it's going to be okay, we can course correct?
There's 3 ways I want to take that. One is, again, from a mindfulness and Buddhist perspective, that idea that everything is constantly shifting and is impermanent. So in moments that are very hard, a mother who's up every 2 hours with her infant, something that is very common is she is feeling like she's going to be there forever. And understandably, it becomes impossible to see the horizon. The more she can't see the horizon, that this will end, forget about how, even for a moment, it just will. The more she can't see that, the more stuck she will feel and the more overwhelmed she is absolutely going to be. So sometimes it's as simple as quietly whispering, this part is going to end. Now, what often falls from that is guilt. I should be enjoying it because everybody said, thank God I'm so lucky. I have a baby. Maybe I tried really hard. Maybe I've had a lot of loss. So now I don't feel entitled to those moments. And that goes back to our original discussion, which is virtually every mother feels anger, anxiety, overwhelm, because it's so high stakes. You do not only feel bliss all the time. So the next part is just validating and acknowledging ambivalent emotion and how constant ambivalent emotion is. Moods are in motion. They are shifting from one to the next. So they're impermanent too. And we just have to leave the door open for them to come and them to go. That's our job, and not cling to any one emotion. And the third one is relating to that, ruptures are part of relationships and we need them, that it's never too late to repair. That's actually a very important one. I say to anybody who's listening, if someone has ever really hurt you, maybe your parent, imagine them sitting in front of you, maybe you're 30, maybe you're 40, looking you straight in the eye and really feeling that we know when people mean it and saying, I'm sorry, I hurt you. I know I hurt you. It's wild. Doesn't matter how many years later, what that can do when someone just looks at you and says, takes accountability for how they may have hurt you, even if non-intentionally and sometimes intentionally. That doesn't mean it's all better, but we can always repair. It's one of the things we least understand. We think that we have to do it in the moment or it's irreparable damage. That's not how relationship works. Relationships are messy. When we feel guilt, which is I've done something bad, or shame, which is I am bad, if we stay stuck in the guilt or the shame, we can't actually repair. It's like quicksand. And like I said, we shut down, we move into it, we spiral there. And actually, what happens is we'll do further rupture because we get withdrawn and removed due to it. So I often say, if you weren't feeling guilt and shame, what was there first? Whatever was there first is the emotion you actually need to be paying attention to. Maybe it was anger. Maybe very often it's grief. And we actually end up, we're in grief about something. And so we act in anger because we are not tolerating and sitting with whatever we're feeling grief about. Maybe it's the grief that I became a mother and I miss my freedom, but we don't feel like that's allowed. So we're more angry most of the time. And now we're more guilty most of the time. And actually, what we need to do is give that grief some time because it makes sense if you feel a sense of loss in becoming a mother. Or maybe we're trying to get pregnant and we are not succeeding and we are angry. We're angry at our partner. We're short with our friends. And then we feel so guilty for that. Except what we really need to do is tend to that grief, that pain of this loss is really hard. And we need that self-compassion. So the last way is if you're hearing that question going, yeah, how do I never fuck up my kid? Excuse my French. You could cut it if you need to, Natalie. I take care of what I'm really feeling, usually the grief that's behind the guilt.
Okay, I have two questions that come out of this incredible answer. Is one, how do you cut through the noise of understanding what's underneath? Like shame, guilt, these feelings, the anger can be so loud, especially women are cycling, they're hormonal. We feel all sorts of things all the time. No one day is the same. So how do we cut through? I'll start there. Like, how do we cut through the noise?
By listening to me tell you that guilt is not actually a human emotion. I think we're messing everybody up. Guilt is a judgment. Guilt is a thought about whatever was there before. So if every time you feel guilt, all you do from here on out is say, what was I feeling before this? What was going on with me before this? You're going to be doing it.
Mm, love that. Yeah, it's one of the practices I do when I'm driving in the car. Like, I'll be like, this is what I'm feeling. This is like, I just need to scream, let that out, and then come down to what actually is happening and just talking it out to myself. I hear that's a genius practice. It shows signs of intelligence. So I'm okay with it. I'm okay with looking like a crazy person.
And there are people who really struggle with naming their emotions, and we try to help someone if that's the case on learning body sensations and how do body sensations relate to emotion. You don't need to know the emotion word on the wheel. There are therapists who teach that. I often say, I don't care what it's called. You name it. This is when I'm blue. What does blue feel like in your body? Why were you feeling blue? What do you need when you're feeling blue? I don't care that it's called sad. Sad helps us because it's a way we communicate. So over time, like this thing that I feel I never realized was sad, this is sad, is important. But being, again, self-compassionate, many of us don't know how to do that if it was never done for us. From a mothering perspective, how our children learn to regulate their emotions is first by us giving them language for it. They otherwise don't know. We look at them and we say when they're on the floor in a puddle screaming and don't want to put on their hat, you're angry right now because mommy, and they're going like this, because mommy wants you to put on your hat. You're angry. You're banging your fists. So we tell them how we know they're angry. You're angry. You're red in the face. I think your body feels very tight right now. You're angry. Come with me. Let's go punch this pillow. You're angry. Mommy's asking you to put on your hat and you don't want to. That's what we do.
Mm,
If no one ever did that for us, why would we know that is anger? That feeling.
mm. I think it's brilliant what you're saying. And like to just really, it doesn't have to be a name of an emotion. It could be a color, anything, essentially, just to call it out, name it so that you can move through it and let it go and see an experience as for what it is and not for all the stories or the heaviness that you carry with it. I think that's brilliant. The second part of my question is, after pregnancy, we speak a lot about women's hormones, the loss of hormones. So the normalcy of how she connects with herself is not around. And so, how do we deal, or how do you speak to a woman that is moving through the postpartum and not able to come back to herself or not able to feel the presence within herself?
So, as a psychologist, one of the important things I think I do is psychologists and psychiatrists have what's called the controlled active diagnosis. That does matter because the hormones do change and shift how most mothers feel. Because I think, like I said, all these old coping mechanisms and beliefs about ourselves get shaken up, but that interacts with what you just said, the hormonal system, which absolutely is in an upheaval too. And so it's very important to go, okay, but how much of an upheaval? Diagnostically, what we're looking for, let's say if we're separating between something like baby blues, which is very normative, it's when a mother's more tearful postpartum, where she may feel quite low mood. That is very different than what would be called postpartum depression. How? Most of the time, diagnostically, the hormones should create a shift in maybe intensity of a feeling, not for long duration and not as high in intensity and not to the point that it affects your quality of life. So again, high stakes, normal for most mothers to have what's called intrusive, scary thoughts. What happens when I walk down these stairs that are very steep? I'm going to fall. And the thought just goes through their head. That's not postpartum OCD the second you have the thought. 9 out of 10 moms will have more anxiety because of the hormones and all the shifting that's occurring in their brain and their body. However, if the mother can't descend the stairwell because she's afraid she's going to fall, if she thinks it all the time, and so she just needs someone else to take the baby downstairs, or she just doesn't leave the house. Now the intensity and duration and the impact on quality of life is more diagnostic. So the hormones should be making an impact, but not to the point that it's lasting over time. In baby blues, we say 2 weeks. I often say, honestly, that it's lasting longer than 3, 4 days at a high intensity. I would want to know as a psychologist that the hormones shouldn't be doing that. And for many of us, they do because we have baseline hormones, and from our baseline, they shift. And some of us go into major depletions or excess of hormones that we really need to feel regulated. And that's a big part of why many women are suffering.
Yeah, I'm still listening. I'm absorbed because I feel it right now in my body. Like my hormones are depleted and I haven't had these thoughts like in since my last miscarriage. So I'm like, okay, something's occurring in my body right now that I'm experiencing that's not of the norm. And so I can just imagine how people, women that just give birth, that have an expectation put on them, or they have this feeling of, I need to make sure that this baby survives, or I don't know what to do with this, or even just the regular cycle of PMS or PMDD and how that shows up in a parent child relationship. So I just think that this is fascinating. So I was like, please keep speaking.
We want to do this delicate flexibility between normalizing the shift. A woman's not going, what's wrong with me? I'm quicker to anger. I'm more impatient. I'm more anxious. These thoughts are there. Yes. For how long and how intense are they? Can you say, thank you, anxiety, for reminding me that I need to eat well today in order to take care of my body because I'm trying to get pregnant? Or are these thoughts so intense and overwhelming that I'm actually staring at a wall and I can't even get myself to shower? And is that lasting for 5 days, 2 weeks? Because no, we shouldn't have to feel that way. And so there's a very big difference. We want to normalize, but we want to be careful when we normalize to also say you deserve help if it's going on too long or too intensely. That's not just chalking it to hormones. We risk that too.
I think that's so interesting. And I want to go to different phases of a parent child relationship because as we develop, us maybe we feel, okay, we got this. We're feeling real good in a stage. And then all of a sudden, a new stage occurs, puberty or moving out of the house or going in, like all these different shifts that happen in a child's life that is very normal for kids to move through. How can mothers during those shifts, during those transitions, maybe not cling or not distance, but like really widen their strategies during those phases?
Remember when I said everything's impermanent and everything shifts? One of the best ways to help somebody not cling is to know that in the times that feel very difficult, that won't last. But the times that are very blissful, and they do occur, there's like these seasons that a child and a parent can often feel very in sync. Maybe it's an age that the parent intuitively feels more able to parent. This does happen. And everyone's like, what age is that? It depends for people. That we don't cling to that item because we need to stay open to our child shifting and changing and us shifting and changing. It goes back to motherhood's not this destination point. It's more a journey and you are continuing to develop. You don't eventually develop by the age of 18 months or eventually develop when they first go to elementary school. Just like you don't arrive at their birth, you don't arrive at any stage of development. It's life. But like adolescence in many ways, it is a very particular stage, and motherhood's just a much longer adolescence where we are journeying to becoming ourselves and alongside our children journeying to become their, in some ways I like to say, first selves, because as they become parents they will also journey to themselves again. I often think of motherhood, and many people have talked about this. There's a term called matrescence, which is like adolescence hormonally, but it's also from a psychological standpoint. There's a revisiting the self, and that begins from the moment a mother conceptualizes of having a child. There's a revisiting of the self, a rewriting of narratives or stories they have about themselves as they are helping their child do that. So sometimes it's what is a tool or what is a skill. It's actually what is, I like to say, it's what is the knowledge, staying open, reflecting in any given moment, in any given season. What am I learning about myself? Who am I? What am I learning about my child? Who are they? What am I needing right now in this season? And what are they? Rather than, I don't know, drink celery juice.
Mhm. Love that. I really appreciate the term season. And I know we speak a lot in seasons. And I think that's so smart because it's cyclical. Life isn't linear. And we always get a chance to go back and return to and either meet ourselves again and have care taken a different way. In terms of attachment theory, like how does it work in that way? If someone feels very secure and then all of a sudden this rupture creates anxiety, does it shift that piece for themselves, or does it, once secure, always secure?
Yes, and attachment theory and attachment science are the most butchered concepts in social media and pop culture. And I say that very arrogantly as
Good.
somebody who studied it for my master's and PhD thesis and ever since, and who has had the real privilege of working with and aligning with and learning from some of the main theorists and researchers in the area. And I say it's butchered because we oversimplify it and overcomplicate it at the same time. What I can explain is, going back to what I said earlier, from a very young age, we know for sure by science that through watching these moment to moment interactions, that a child is extracting meaning. So that's the most important word we can use, meaning from a relationship right off the bat. So they move, let's go really simple. They move what are those things called where kids, you don't have to edit this out. Everybody's going to be like, mobile. They move a mobile with their feet, and then it moves and the child goes, oh, look at me. I did that. Now a parent goes, stop kicking, making noise. Okay, once, whatever. Maybe they're trying to write something, but on repetition in various forms. Don't do that. I'm trying to work. Every time they start to develop a shutdown response, where what can happen, where the imprint can be, again, this is not once, we're talking millisecond to millisecond. Usually over the first 3 to 5 years of life, children are extracting meaning about themselves, most importantly, and their capacity in the world. They're very arrogant, all of them. And that's the meaning they're making very early. I smile, my mom smiles back at me. Ooh, look at me. I make people smile. Sometimes I make my mom cry. That's okay. But I have an impact. I can elicit an emotional response. And we have to think about this again, millisecond to millisecond. Very often this can shame parents when they start to hear this. And I always say, you're not thinking millisecond to millisecond. You're thinking one event. It's not constant. It's consistent that children make meaning from. So consistently over time, they begin to make this template of patterns and relationships. Maybe someone creates a bit of a template that I'm going to be rejected. Let's stick with my mobile response. I'm often rejected. And so they learn a coping mechanism. The coping mechanism they might learn is to withdraw, to shut down. That is what we often call an avoidant attachment pattern. How stable is that? Pretty stable over time. If it has already begun to form so strongly, what they now need is what's called a corrective experience, also on repetition. So it's not unchangeable, but it gets formed. That's why therapy works. Everybody says the most important part of a relationship with a therapist is the relationship, but they don't actually know what they're talking about. What they're talking about is that through the therapeutic relationship, someone's old patterns show up. And a very good therapist picks up on the patterns and works so that the patient has a new experience over and over again. If they often shut down, the therapist catches the shutdown. She may name it, she may not name it, she might just respond differently over and over again while she knows what's happening inside the patient. And over time, a new pattern, a new attachment story, a new belief about themselves gets formed. That's what can happen with your child. That's what can happen with a therapist. That's what can happen with a partner. What's tricky is partners both bring their own patterns. And so sometimes they can end up repeating rather than helping to correct. And that's where couples therapy comes in.
So what I'm understanding is that attachment theory, like attachment style, isn't on a spectrum. Like you form a template, this is your go-to. When something happens, when a transition, a hiccup, a rupture happens, you go back to this template. And over time, if it's corrected consistently throughout, then you can form a new corrective behavior to your attachment.
So I will edit that because it's important. It is on a spectrum. What's on the spectrum is the style of relating or the style of coping, not necessarily behavior. So there's 4 quadrants we talk about: anxious, avoidant, secure, and disorganized. People can be high in anxiety and high in avoidance. High in anxiety is hypervigilance as a way of coping with often feeling rejected, for example. High in
Mhm.
avoidance is withdrawing and hyper focusing on the self due to feeling like others aren't available to you. You could be high in both. That's actually disorganized very often. Low in anxiety and low in avoidance would actually be what we call secure. So it actually doesn't exist in categories. It does exist along a continuum, but there are only so many ways we cluster as human beings. And those are the ways.
I think it's so interesting because, like, my background is nervous system and fascia. How the fascia system organizes itself is continuous, but it's nonlinear. And so, as an infant tries to stand, a parent will look at it and be like, "Oh, they're just trying to stand," but they're trying so many different ways of standing. Their body is organizing themselves every time in a way that is never the same. No gesture is ever the same. It's always unique. And so I think it's so interesting that you're saying the exact same thing, but in an attachment way, is that it's never going to be the same, but it's just going to be consistent. So it's not just one event, it's not just trying to stand, it is throughout situations where ruptures or conflict occurs.
Yes.
Or
And the
just
nervous system and attachment really overlap. It's
mhm,
a whole other episode, but they really blend towards one another. And so, what the child is constantly doing is attempting to create that secure attachment. And so, until they formulate that blueprint, which is the same as until they formulate how they stand,
mhm.
they are trying a lot. That's
Yeah,
the kid who coos and the kid who reaches and the kid who gets angry that we believe and science shows us is occurring in those first 3 years. Then
yeah,
they develop how I stand.
yeah,
And then
eventually
it's actually
they'll
hard to
learn.
change
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. Like, eventually they will do. How they get there and what they understand from it, we don't know unless we have the experience and the know-how of, oh, this is actually what's happening. So this is a general question and maybe like harder to answer, but what do you wish every mother understood about the child that is actively becoming themselves with the mother's experience involved? What's a takeaway that you would want them to feel after listening to this episode?
That it's actually hopeful, not scary. That your child is an active participant in the relationship. That their one goal, like to your point earlier, to stand, their one goal, literally one goal, is to connect to you. And they're going to keep trying. So you're not alone. They are going to continue. They need you like food, shelter, and water, even when they're 15. And that they are going to continue to make those bids for connection, those efforts. And they're going to continue to show you if they're making a story about themselves that's not serving them, or a story about you that's not about you being an example of the world that's not serving them. There are incredible opportunities rather than going, oh my God, I messed them up, regardless of what age it is. Instead, go, just pay it, pause. What are they telling you? At any point, you can course correct. They're an active participant inviting you into the dance at any point. If you don't feel guilty, you can enter it with openness and curiosity and course correct. And it doesn't need to be perfect. Remember, 70%, 30%. You can course correct with a 30% attunement, and you're doing really well.
Yeah, I love that because no matter how amazing you try to be, things are always going to come up. Hormones cycle, what you're experiencing shifts and changes. And so, how can you show up as your best self all the time? We're imperfect. And so, just to say there's hope, take a pause, take a breath, notice yourself, notice your presence, and then act, I think is such a beautiful takeaway. I know where to find you, but if someone wants to work with you and find you, where would they go?
You can find me on Instagram at Dr. Cotler. My website is Dr. Tanya Cotler. I make it very easy. And I am also, if you're in the Toronto or Greater Toronto area of Canada, I'm also the co-founder of an integrative mental health clinic called Rennie. That's inner backwards, the inverse of inner. So RENNI, where we offer a whole host of treatments, including psychotherapy, yoga, massage, and it's really a way or a place or a home to find yourself.
I love that. I'm so grateful for this episode landing exactly where it did selfishly in my life because even though I have access to you all the time, it just really served me today to be like, yeah, this is normal. What I'm experiencing is normal right now. And I don't have to beat myself up about it. I can just move through it, call it out, take that breath and shift. So I really appreciate it. I really hope this episode lands for my listeners as well and validates them in their own experience because you provide such a safe space to feel and explore and experience. So thank you so much, T. I really
Thank
appreciate
you for having me.
that.